All right, so today I wanted to talk about this tweet from Zuby Music, and he really hits the nail on the head with this one, saying the powers that be want the next generation to be physically weak, unstable, amoral, lonely, directionless, genderless, anxious, childless, narcissistic, bug-eating twerps who live in multiple self-inflicted mental disorders who live in pods. Just say no. And like I said, he completely hits the nail on the head, and that this is the goal. And again, a lot of people probably would scoff at that, but have you been living under a rock for the last generation? Like, seriously. People are physically weak these days. I mean, the numbers very clearly show that. I mean, in the most ultimate form of that. I mean, you look at grip strength, you look at just typical and good old bench press, squat, those kind of things. Like, yeah, people are physically weak. Look at the reduction in people playing physical sports. Unstable. Again, people are incredibly unstable these days. I mean, look at relationships, right? Like and look at friendships too. Like look at how people can go from seemingly normal, best friends or, you know, husband, wife, whatever, to snap your fingers and things completely change. Amoral, right? That's another prime one. Again, like we have no morals and ethics at all in society anymore. It's entirely um I don't know if selfish is the right word, but again, people whatever gets them, whatever floats their boat basically is what most people are concerned about, right? People are, you're accused of being selfish if you want to earn a living, but not if you want to put a million people out of work just so you can live an extra year, right? You're considered selfish if you if you don't want to lose your house or earn a living, but you're not selfish if you're, a public school teacher expecting constant raises and you're 3 months off every year and your best benefits package in existence, basically. Like again, like it's just a complete backwards clown world. What's considered moral is typically amoral, and what's considered amoral is typically moral, right? It's just complete insanity. Lonely, yeah. I mean, of course. Directionless. I mean, yeah. Look at the younger generation. This is probably one of the biggest problems facing society these days, and hardly anyone is talking about it. Like hardly anyone is talking about it. Genderless, yeah. This woke insanity is obvious. Anxious, yeah. That's very obvious. Again, like why are people so anxious? Well, number one, they've been lied to that there's this horrible pandemic, there's this horrible virus going around right now. There isn't. No, it's almost exactly the same as the flu for most people, right? And that's not my opinion. That's Stanford studies. That's numbers coming straight from the CDC, right? That's not my opinion. Um, like not to mention too, oh, we're destroying the climate, right? But the climate alarmism is insane. It's oh, you're a horrible human being if you're white and or male, or especially white and male, right? Like again, these complete lies that we're told is like, well, of course people are anxious, right? Of course people are directionless, of course people are lonely, right? And when we lie to people to such a degree that we're lying to people, of course people are going to be lonely and amoral, right? Because if people recognize that society is screwing them over, which they are, the big problem with that is a lot of times people think that it's not, like they think it's the big corporations, so it's evil capitalism. No, it isn't. I mean, the corporations are bad, but um, who enables the corporations? It's the government, right? That this is part of the reason why um, you know nowadays things seem to be trending in the direction of not communism, more or less fascism, in that the government wants to allow some remnants of the free market to exist, knowing that the average person is going to be dumb and naive enough to, when things inevitably don't go their way, they'll blame the corporations and not the government. right? It's just hilarious to see people blame corporations when corporations only exist based upon an act of government. If there was no government, if we had a free society, there would be no corporations because there would be no government to enable corporations, right? Like it's just complete insanity people to believe that. Childless, again, that's another big one, right? Don't have kids, right? And that the people who are having the most kids these days, well, Christians are, an exception to that, which is a good thing, but um, who is it? It's the most unstable. I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, the last people you want to see having kids, right? The last people, and again, like personally, the people I know that are having kids are not the ones you want having kids, right? And the ones who should be having kids are the ones who aren't, at least on average, right? The most stable like people I know, at least that are in the age category of would otherwise be having kids, none of them have kids, right? None of them, right? They have stable jobs. They could easily support it. They're fairly well spoken, but again, no kids, right? And who are the ones who are? It's the unstable people who had kids. Relationships clearly not going to work out. Like, again, kids going to grow up without a dad, probably. Like, again, like, why are we not talking about this more as a society? I mean, the data is very clear on this stuff. It's not even debatable, right? That we have this thing, this society going on right now that, oh, well, you got to wear a mask and it's for other people's safety, not your own. Well, if we spend half the time trying to reduce obesity than we did spreading the virus, if we spend half the time trying to reduce single motherhood as we did trying to reduce spread of the virus, we would save leaps and bounds more lives, like leaps and bounds. And we would, especially when you include the amount you would improve. But we don't do that. And we don't do that is because we're a backwards society, right? People mostly just care about virtue signaling these days. And that's the other thing that I would add to this list of things is that we value virtue signaling more than we actually value being virtuous, right? And what I mean by that is that, if you don't know, is that we value pretending to be virtuous, pretending to be a good person, or at the very least, half-assed being a good person, than we do actually being a good person, right? And again, like I've talked a lot about this too. Like a lot of this stuff just goes without saying, but um, and here's the other thing too is that this stuff isn't trending in the right direction. Do a lot of people poo-poo and say, "Oh, you're being overly dramatic," or, I'm just trying to think up the um, the opposition that I would have to what I'm saying. Well, that would only be correct if we're trending in the right direction, but we're not. Right? We're not trending in the right direction. So, in other words, this stuff's going to get worse before it gets better, right? It's going to get worse before it gets better. I mean, you look at what's just gone on in the last year. How many people have lost their jobs? How many people have developed addiction to drugs, to alcohol? How many people have become anxious? These problems aren't just magically going to go away, right? Like AHS and some of these, like, the most cringy, annoying things ever. They, Hinshaw, or they'll tweet, "Oh, here's a helpline, guys. Here's a helpline." Just imagine if Jason Kenney said, "Yeah, we're gonna completely ignore the virus. We're gonna put up a helpline, right? You think you have it? Here's a helpline." Just imagine the outrage. But there's no outrage for a problem that's objectively a lot worse than the quote unquote pandemic, and hardly anyone cares. And I think that this is probably one of the worst problems about this stuff too, is that there's a lot of people that recognize this stuff, but they don't say anything. And I think I kind of know why. Is that typically you get vilified for bringing this stuff up. If you point out that obesity is a bigger problem than the virus, which again it objectively is, you're going to get vilified. Oh, you're fat phobic. You're fat shaming, right? And not to mention too, it's um, minorities are disproportionately overweight, so they'll call you racist as well. Like again, like it's predictable as day, right? It's predictable as day. I mean, the establishment and the powers that be, they want to treat anxiety and depression and drug they want to treat that with they want the pharmaceutical companies to make a bunch of money, which they'll probably get kickbacks for, right? And not to mention too, I think politicians, regardless of what side they're on, I don't think this is a partisan thing in any way, shape, or form. They want problems to exist in society because if there was no problems, well, how do they get elected? Right? Because politicians traditionally get elected through here's this massive problem we're facing, I'm going to solve it, vote for me. That's how politicians get elected. I mean, how did Trump get elected? Mass immigration, corruption, drain the swamp. I mean, you can debate whether he did a good job on those things, but that's how he got elected. How did Justin Trudeau get elected? I mean, especially the last time around, free stuff, right? How's the NDP getting elected? We're going to get elected. It's going to be free stuff. Oh, Jason Kenney, he wants to take away your health care and he's going to take away your all this free stuff. How did the Democrats get elected? Well, basically, we're not Trump, but you know what I mean, right? So again, politicians need these problems in society to get elected. And people say, "Oh, are you saying that politics?" It doesn't matter, right? It really doesn't matter in that it may very well be subconscious, right? I don't think a lot of, I mean, there probably is some, but most of these politicians, I don't think they're twirling their mustache and being like, see, I want anxiety and depression to be through the roof. No, I'm not saying that. But I think that the data is very clear on this in that they're really not doing anything to improve the situation. Like, what are they doing to improve the situation? Are we having an honest, I mean, the first step towards solving a problem is having an honest conversation about it. We're not doing that. We're not doing that, right? So, yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin on a lot of this stuff because we're so far gone. It's not even funny. So, people, like to bring up, oh, well, what are the solutions? Well, the big problem is that there's no easy solution, right? We're so far off the deep end that fixing this stuff, it's going to cause a lot. Again, if you're hooked on heroin, there's no easy way to get off heroin, right? You're going to have to go through withdrawals. And this is the reason society's so effed up these days, is that people just refuse to want to go through those withdrawals. So what do? Oh, let's just take more heroin. Let's just take more heroin, right? Poverty's through the roof rather than, you know, do the actual solution of stop incentivizing people to end up in the situations they end up in. Oh, well, that would cause a little bit of pain and suffering. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cause more pain and suffering in the meantime, right? Just complete and utter madness. So what are the solutions? Well, the solutions are, I mean, like I said, there's no easy solution, but a step in the right direction is actually pretty easy. It's basically the big thing is stop pushing the woke stuff. Stop pushing the woke stuff. Actually hold governments accountable and stop incentivizing bad decisions. When it comes to people being amoral, well, stop incentivizing it. I mean, prime example, what is the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial proven? That people willing to use the most amount of violence are the ones that gets their way. And people recognize that. So what's going to start happening? I mean, it already is happening, but it's going to happen more. Well, people are going to recognize. The more violence you use, the more likely you are to get your way. Um, Lonely. I mean, that one, like, I think the reason why people are lonely is most people have no integrity whatsoever. Like there's people that have, friends and acquaintances, but most of those people aren't real. I mean, it's one thing to have a friend you can go have a beer with. It's entirely another thing to have a friend that you can talk about, intimate, private things with and actually have them, talk about it in an actual, um, good way. I don't know what the right word for it is, right? But you know what I mean. Directionless. Well, that's very obvious. We've completely destroyed the economy, especially over the last year. I mean, what do you do? I mean, not to mention too, we lie to people and tell them, oh, your key to getting a good job is a college degree, which sometimes it is, but most of the time it isn't. But the problem is a lot of these jobs you kind of need a degree for, or I guess a better way of putting it is that there's so many people wanting these jobs that you don't need a degree for the job, but the people that get hired have degrees because there's so many people wanting the job that they just filter out the people that don't have degrees. The problem with the degree is you spend $100,000 and it's meaningless, right? At the end of the day, it's meaningless most of the time. So again, that would be very simple. I mean, stop. Like again, most jobs where you quote unquote need a degree, you really don't. Why do you need a degree to work in the business field? Why do you need a degree to work in tech? Why do you need a degree to program? It's all stuff you can learn on the job. Why do you need a degree to be an accountant? There's things you probably need, higher education for, doctor, lawyer, but again, engineer. But most things you don't. Basically anything in the business field, you don't need a degree. That's all stuff you can learn on your own and or on the job. Like I say, tech, uh, you know, computers. Well, why do you need a degree to code? Right? That's stuff you can learn on your own, or at the very least, you can learn from someone else or another company. Right? So that's a very easy fix. Genderless. That's the woke stuff. Anxious. Like I said, I already brought that one up. It's that you know we're telling people there's this horrible virus going around when that's complete BS. We're telling people that we're doing irreparable harm to the environment, which is BS. We're telling people, oh, if you're white, you're inherently racist. If you're male, you're inherently sexist. Like again, like this stuff is that recognizing the problems is really actually not that hard, right? It's really not that hard. Childless was very easy. We stopped incentivizing the wrong people for having kids and start incentivizing the right people to have kids. Like, I mean, just off the top of my head, what are some things we could do? Well, number one, we got to get rid of the welfare state, right? The welfare state is basically can be summarized in that we're going to pay unstable women to have kids with unstable men, which is going to generate even more unstable people, right? It's really not hard to predict. So, and not to mention too, I think we should incentivize, having. I mean, I think married couples with kids should get tax breaks. I mean, I think they already do to an extent, but they should even more, right? If you're having kids in a stable two-parent household, you should be rewarded for that, right? Narcissistic. I think that just comes back to I think people recognize that the way you get what you want in society is to lie, manipulate, cheat, steal. So obviously that's going to breed narcissism. Um, Bug-eating twerps. Again, that's the whole anti-meat agenda. That's complete BS as well. But um, and again, living in pods, again, that comes back to the whole collectivist, BS climate change argument as well. So again, like I said, the solutions, this there's no perfect solution. That's another reason I think I can't stand about people is, oh, you don't have a perfect solution to these problems, therefore let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, no, it's not an excuse, right? The steps in the right direction are very easy. The problem is that no one wants to go for it because people are so brainwashed. And the people who do recognize the problems oftentimes are too afraid to call this stuff out because they're afraid to be called racist, sexist, all the negative words in the book, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I say, check out those links and stay tuned for more.